we'll get more into detail with them as we're with these edge zones as they get released. Um, and there has been an update where they're out there. I'm not prepared right now to share all these layouts. I will. I'm tweaking some things. And last week was a tough week for me, not trading wise, for other reasons, but I got through it. And so it was kind of I didn't get a lot done, put it that way, last week. But these edge zones, there's some really good opportunities. But the reason I'm bringing George in is he's been consistent lately, and I'm not going to have him talk about what he's doing. I think there's a lot of stuff that's shared in the team room for that. I do want to go through what it feels like just to have a conversation with someone who's trading well so that they could document what it's like when they're feeling well, trading well, to go back and learn from it. Then everybody else could get a sense of how you become kind of mechanical when you're trading well and you become the opposite when you're not, and your emotions start making your decisions. Like, for example, I'm going to show you this today. I had said to myself, let's not take breakouts. It's just not a breakout type of day, right? And this is the S&P. Well, my first moment of taking a breakout was, where the hell was it? It was in here. I think it was right after the open. No, it wasn't in here. It was a trade that I didn't take that I should have, because it was like it worked. It's like, well, that's fine. I told myself I wasn't going to take any breakouts. I don't even know where it is now. But then what happens is you set up a rule, so I'm not going to take any breakouts. I don't want to get stuck buying the high of a rotation and selling the low of a rotation, right? Because that's what a breakout is. Because it just chops and it gets really slow, so you end up getting stuck. Then you don't do it and you see it work one time, right? And what happens? Damn, maybe I should have taken it. So then sure enough, we get stuck in this from like 9:45 to 10:45. There's nothing going on in here. And I can't tell you how much I had to fight the temptation not to buy it here or sell it here or buy it here because of the breakout that was imminent. At any one point, we were chopping around this yellow line and underneath this red edge zone. But there was a breakout coming. It couldn't leak out to the downside. This is what it did to the upside. Then it comes back. So we go bar by bar across. It stays really choppy. There was a breakout coming, but look how hard it was to catch it. And then it comes all the way back. So it goes from bearish to bullish. Typical on a session like today. So now it's like, well, what do? You look at, you got short the top of the range in here. Looks like a good play, but that's over with. Now you look to buy down here at 62.75 and look for the chop to continue. But it's slightly bullish with this long down up bar. I'm just trying to underscore and focus on the process and how price action and money, when you throw them all together, will get you to, it'll try to change your mind. The market's trying to get you to really, the best way I could put it, and I don't want to be insensitive. I have a couple friends that are alcoholics, but I would think so. I have a little experience with it, growing up with these guys, and they're like, it would be like an alcoholic trying not to drink, and everyone's talking, got them in a bar and saying, oh, it's all right, just have a sip. That would be awful to do that in real life. But in trading, that's what happens. You got all these negative devils coming at you, trying to get you to do things that are outside of what you plan to do. So you got to know that going in, and you can't let that bother you. You can't let the money or the suspense get you into doing something that you had set out not to do. It's really important. Now, going back to these edge zones, there's things that there could be an element of too many of them, too few, but there's, when you start to drill them down, and I think when everybody gets their hands on it, when you start to drill down on it, you'll see and find the ones that are going to work best for you, where it's not a coincidence. They work too well to be a coincidence. It doesn't have to change what you guys have done in the past. Don't let this be, oh, I got to change. This is just to help understand and focus with better framework and better structure. Maybe it will highlight a better location or two for you. But if you're doing something somewhat decent in another area, use this to overlap it maybe a little bit, not change everything you're looking to do. If you're being consistent, then stay consistent with what the hell you're doing. But tweaking this stuff is pretty neat. I'm not going to turn this meeting into or even the next few when we start drilling down into these edge zones, into, how you change your right click and how you modify it and get through that. I'd like to have a lot of that kind of done and then just share the packs with people. CQG Market Delta calls them packs, not chart definitions, but they mean the same thing. The value in these zones, now everybody else is going to know about these zones outside the edge community, but the value is how you tweak them down into not getting too many or too few. There's other platforms that even have things like this. This isn't like brand new, but drilling them down and knowing how to use them, in a qualification state is where the money is, or could be, right? But if I bring this down and just get into the NASDAQ, right, and you can see all this green get laid out as it jumps up, and then the market holds there for a few rotations, and it puts out green, holds there and holds there. So it's not coincidental where these things could give you less randomness. But not to talk about these, let's just go into what I initially wanted to do. If I could pull this other screen up. Maybe I'll talk to George over these screens. Wait, where's that other one at? Nope, wrong one. All right. So what we do once in a while are these trader spotlights. We haven't done one in a while, and I want to do one. George, I think he's talked in the past. George is from Wisconsin. In fact, I was thinking about you over the weekend, George. I was watching this show about people that live in Alaska, and I know you're in Wisconsin, but to me it's the same thing, Wisconsin, Alaska. And they were living off I know you don't do this, but they were living off the land and hunting squirrels and eating squirrels, things like that. And that's what I always think of people in Wisconsin, but that's neither here nor there. George is from Wisconsin. He's a pilot, and he's been in the edge. How long have you been in the edge now with us? A couple years almost?
Yeah, it'll be 2 years next month.
No kidding. Man, that flew by. 2 years next month?
Yeah, wow. It would have been 2 years of not trading if you hadn't called me.
No kidding. Hey, hold on 1 second. What do you mean no trading? You would have just kind of watched and...
Yep. No, I would have walked away. I had enough. I tried everything I thought I could, and you said, well, hey, let's just give this a shot. What do you got to lose? And so I did. And
yeah, I remember talking to you, and you were reluctant because of what you just said. You're like, wow, this is just another whatever.
Zero-sum game was my thought.
Yeah. Right. Well, exactly. But then you were thinking this is just another educational thing that's going to cost me money. Because you had been through a lot, right? You had paid for a lot of stuff?
Yep.
What made you do it, though? Yep. Just that simple? What do you got to lose?
Yeah, what do I got to lose? And I liked, I had demoed the Market Delta platform, and I really liked the footprints, and I saw some things that I didn't see before. And, saw your webinar, did the trial, and you looked at the market differently, both on a technical aspect and a psychological aspect, and that piqued my curiosity. So I thought, you know what, I haven't heard this before. Maybe this is maybe the missing link.
They say that it's just like a trade. It's like you take a trade you shouldn't, you take a trade you shouldn't, you take a trade you shouldn't. And then you say, I'm not going to take this next one, and that's the one you should take. And I think a lot of people do that with when they've been through a lot of education is they buy a lot of stuff they shouldn't have bought, but they didn't know, so it's not their fault. And then they pass on what they should have done in the first place, and you didn't do that. You were close to doing it, but you didn't do it. And I think a lot of people, they're like, it's just more education. I've already been through it, and they assume all of it's bad or mediocre, and they say no to what they should have said yes to, and they said yes to shit that they should have said no to right along. And that's what kind of gets people all stuck and brings in all kinds of psychological mess. Would you say how long have now, it seems like you've been trading well do you have like a run that you have going?
Yeah, probably the last 3 weeks, I've reversed my down year. I was pretty much down to even, I'd gain some, go back to flat, gain some. Last year was my first year that I was profitable after paying for all my expenses. And, of course, I went into this year maybe a little over confident and, realize that you have to really be even keel and make sure that your confidence doesn't sway and that you're always changing certain things to keep that confidence. And, when you had told me, that you'd like me to talk a little bit on confidence, I was like, holy crap, that, well, I'll just show you my setups, but that doesn't help someone create confidence. And I'm, as people know that are in the edge room, I'm freely open to share what I'm doing. I may not necessarily, especially for new people, want to spill the whole beans because I want them to have some skin in the game and be able to, put together. We're always open to new ideas in the room, and we love to have new ideas come in, and so we don't totally spill the beans right off the bat, but a lot of the confidence, people come in and say, well, how can you trade like this? And I've always had the attitude that if you're successful somewhere else, you should be successful in another endeavor. Well, that may not always be true because there's different events that happen that can create that confidence. People say just jump in and trade. Well, the problem with that is that you start to doubt yourself, and if you start doubting yourself, there's research that shows that your brain will encode a behavior just after 3 repetitions. Well, if you have 3 bad trades, now you're telling yourself you're a terrible trader, right? So now where's your confidence? And it could be the opposite side. You could be like, hey, 3 great trades, I'm doing awesome, and then all of a sudden that's one trade that takes all your winning profits. So I really had to think about the confidence, and really what I did, Anthony, is I looked back at some of my training at United and some of the personal like a Napoleon Hill, Vincent Peale, a lot of people that, have written books about personal improvement. And, a lot of that is, I'm not good enough, right? So the confidence side of it goes away. But the thing that struck me is, and I can't remember where I read this, but I've always remembered this, is that confidence doesn't only come from the things that you do to create that repetition or from a promise that you're going to get help in a room or you're going to get encouragement from the team room, but it comes from the absence of the things that prevent it. And what I mean by that is, so for instance, in an airplane, I don't go to work and say, I'm not going to crash today. So why should you go into trading saying, I'm not going to lose today? Because that's a part of trading. You're going to have losing trades. How can you control those things? And, so when you look at the confidence and when I look at what it takes, every trade has a chance for a non-compliance and or an error. And what do I mean by a non-compliance or an error? A non-compliance is it's a willful regard or neglect for the trade. You willfully based on your setups, based on your, I'll say, standard operating procedures, kind of crossing it with aviation, of what you're looking for in a trade, I'm going to make this trade because of something. And there's generally three things that we call it air producing conditions that create the error versus the non-compliance. So in non-compliance, you're willfully doing something that, you know what, if you really look in the mirror at the end of the day, you shouldn't have done it, right? On the error side of it, it can be a little bit, it's not necessarily willful, but that's where you really have to look at what's building my confidence and what's not building my confidence, because personal air management is a life skill first and a job skill second. And what do I mean by that? You have, when you go out through life and you go to the day-to-day, you know, someone could probably say something to you and piss you off, right? You could willfully say, you're an idiot, right back at them. But, you know, is that prudent? That's probably more non-compliance versus, you know, maybe saying something, not saying anything at all. Maybe that's the better thing to do. But so, you know, when I look at and if I'm confusing anyone, you know, or there's any questions you want to elaborate, please stop me. But there's basically three air producing conditions, and there's a multiplier on these. Meaning that if you do these, it's going to create even more of a problem in your trading. And you could look at these in any job, in my opinion. But the first one is a time pressure. The second one is a high risk, low frequency event. And the third one is a low signal to noise ratio. So the first one, time pressure. You know, when you go into your day and you're like, okay, I want to make a goal of $400, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're down $100 and I need to make my $400. Are you making the trade because you're trying to get to your goal and you're pressuring yourself in time? Or another example will be, I'm going to make 3 good trades today. Well, based on your triggers, your aiming and firing, nothing came up. You shouldn't let time pressure you into a trade. And time can do that. It can also be a task management issue where you're looking at so many different charts and you're focusing on so many different things that you see a reason to take a trade, but it's not the right thing. Or it may be a broken habit pattern. And those are all part of the time pressure, because you have that, like, okay, I'm sitting in front of the screen, I got to be productive. Well, a lot of people don't realize that you can sit on your hands and be productive because you're not losing money. On the other hand, you could take 2 trades in a day, they both lose money, they were the right trades. You know, you can build confidence on that even though you didn't get your goal, but you didn't let the time affect you. How do you fix that? You know, what are you got to identify the scenarios involving the time pressure that you routinely encounter, you know, and for all of us, it's different. You have to avoid those self-imposed time pressures, like I said before, and you have to stay inside your normal habit patterns and avoid distractions. You know, you can lose track of time in a trade, or, you know, realize that, oh, I didn't realize it was this time already. I mean, those are all time pressures, and they're self-induced or they're self-accepted. You say, oh, well, that was the goal I wanted, so you just accept it. And based on that, you know, that can amplify these next 2 air-producing conditions by as much as 10 times.
Hey, George, when you say ear producing, ERROR?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, so it's either non-compliance or it's an error. And non-compliance is willful. So that, you know, the only way you can fix that is self-control, right? But the error side of it, and I truly believe that most traders have a problem with the error side, not the non-compliance side of it. And, you know, so time is often your most critical asset. So your best strategies in trying to figure that out is you got to plan, you got to create those habit patterns, and have a timely accomplishment of the pattern or the procedure recognition. So when you're setting up to see a trade coming, all your other events that you need to see, whatever the triggers they are, whatever they might be, you can't bypass them. They all, at some point, have to come together for you to not be pressured to take that trade. And if you miss it, you miss it. You don't let time. It's like you do this all the time, Anthony. You trick your mind in saying that you're in the trade. Well, it's not the pressure of missing the trade. It is. It's the time aspect of saying to yourself, guess what? I may not ever get this trade again. Well, you know that's not true. I mean, it's not true, because now you're going against time. No one can fight time. Time is ticking on all of us.
Well, you might not ever get that squirrel, but you're going to get a squirrel. That's the thing. That's where you got to trick. You're going to get that setup. You might not get that setup because you missed it. It might not come back and let you sell it again. And even if it does come back and let you sell it again, you might not want to, because you should have been in it. You know what I mean? It's just a way to reduce the pressure. But on the air side, there's three, right? There's time pressure. What were the? I know you were going through them one by one, and I want you to, because this is good. Time pressure. What were the other two again?
Yep, time pressure, high risk, low frequency events. I'll be talking a little bit about news events and other events that may happen in, your personal life.
Okay.
And then, low signal to noise ratio.
Low signal. All right, you want to continue on the high risk, low risk?
Yep.
Elaborate on
that?
Yep.
Before I do that, one of the things I wanted to stop and kind of sum up with the time pressure and kind of, a lot of people are saying, oh, this is great, but how do I recognize it? And so you can do it in just life's activities, not in front of the screen. So think of a life activity as you would, on your role in the screen, right? So is there some guy that's going to tell me I'm an asshole, and maybe that's where you're going to want to take a trade that doesn't have all my parameters, and you do nothing. So you do nothing. You just don't say anything to this guy, right? It's little habit patterns like that,
It's like mini victories.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that happens, I still find myself getting time pressure because I've always been, I do everything in a day based on the shortest possible amount of time. From the time I wake up, you brush your teeth in a certain way because that's the shortest way possible, and you take a shower in a certain way. And so I find myself that really being an enemy for me. But one of the things that I've done is you create a situational awareness in life and in trading, because they're not separate. They are the same thing in how you react. You will find that trading, one thing for me is finding who I am. I've really found it through trading and no other occupation. So if you can find out, if you can perceive when you're losing that, or you're recognizing you're losing that time pressure, or you're letting that get the best of you and using situational awareness, and you're always checking yourself, that's great. And the way you do that is you run through, okay, this is what I'm looking for. All right, have I had a good day? Is my ego getting the best of me and I'm going to overtrade now? Or am I having a bad day and now I'm revenge trading and I want to get back? You have to recognize how you're feeling when you're going through this, and that's all part of the time pressure. So the next one is high risk and low frequency events. So they're basically events. Let me give you, they're emergencies in an airplane. They're accidents in a car. They may be, a death in your family. They're situations that are infrequently executed. And so you have an event outside of your life, it will affect your trading, and you have to recognize that. On the same token, if you have a news event, or you have, especially this summer with all the surprise, we know about scheduled news events. What happens when we get a news event that moves the market? you have to consider how you're going to react during that time. How are you going to perceive it? How are you going to execute it? And it makes amateurs out of all of us if we don't perceive and execute it correctly. And you know what? You may never. I'm terrible at it. I am absolutely terrible at news reactions. So I have a tendency to be hands off the mouse. That's my own personal inventory when I look at that. I unless I have my total set up, I'm not really doing anything. How do you stop that? What are the action steps of stopping this high risk, low frequency events? Well, you have to take a personal inventory of yourself, what's going on outside of your life. Maintain your proficiency in why you're trading in front of the screen. What are your trigger events? What are your set, aim, fire? This takes you more, you can mentally exercise these also. If you're not in front of the trading screens, and I do this a lot while I'm in flying or nothing, just at cruise flight or driving, I'll think about different market reactions. And when you can not have to look at a checklist of all the things that you need to trigger something, and it may only be one or two. I'm not saying you should have a whole list of things. Everyone's different in how they're going to have their set, aim, fire. But you can mentally exercise those. And by doing that, you're taking actions to buy time now, because these events will really slow down in your mind. And Anthony, you do that all the time. You can see things happen and how the market reacts, especially in the dome, and you're actually slowing down time. That time pressure is not even there for you when you react. So that's kind of the high risk, the low frequency event. The problem with this, though, especially in the news events, is instead of having a 10 times magnification of being bad or good, this can have up to a 15 to 18%. You always hear about people that trade on Fridays, right? Brokers will say that's when most people lose money. Well, yeah, because this will affect their account more than someone who's trying to make a trade on TimeWise, because they're so violent. And so then the last one, low signal to noise ratio. It's important that we cue in and don't get lost on the background noise. What do I mean by this? So the team room is great, right? But there are times that I'm really focusing on a setup, and I'm watching volume, and I'm watching the imbalances, and someone's talking in the room. And it's generally something good, right? It's something you want to hear. I'll either mute the whole room, or I'll just, I won't respond or anything. That's just an example of some of the background noise. The background noise can be other events that are going on outside of your trading.
When you say low signal, it's sometimes not noticed, but yet it's having an effect. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and what I mean by that is so you have high workload times and you have low workload times, right, when you're trading. So on the high workload times, whether it's news, whether the market is moving so fast, you're like, oh shit, I got to get in on one of these moves. You're looking at so many different things, and your task saturation, right? Your mind cannot comprehend the 6 charts or the 6 monitors that you have going. You should be focused on one monitor and maybe one chart, for sure one instrument, until you get better at being able to widen your task saturation. On the other side of that, when your workload gets reduced, what happens? You get bored, you get complacent. Just take a trade here. I'm up on the day. What the hell, And boredom and complacency can not only hurt you in taking the trade, it can hurt you in now what are you looking at in the market? Are you seeing things that really aren't there because you're trying to make something happen? And then, so what happens with those is you lose situational awareness. This is a perfect example of losing situational awareness or having all three of these pressures happen to you or errors happen to you at the same time. What I want you guys to do when you make that next trade, as soon as you get filled, I want you to do a self snapshot of how you feel and what you can see. If you can't see everything and you don't feel the same as before you got in the trade, emotion-wise, physiologically, kinesthetically, you got some more things to work on. But as long as you recognize it, you can use that as confidence that you know you're going in the right direction. And you can start training yourself to say, okay, I'm in a trade. You self-talk yourself through, okay, what do I need to be looking at? Why did I get in the trade? Are those conditions still there? Not just where your stop loss and your profit target is, but you still have to look at that whole big picture, just like you did when you were looking for your ready, set, aim, fire. And this, this is kind of like the time situation. It increases, the error by maybe 10 times. So what are the action steps in this? So you just need to identify the conditions, where you miss these cues, where you get bored, where you get over anxious. So, it's increase the signal or decrease the noise, one or the other. The noise is the market moving all over the place. How can I slow that down? How can I read the market? The signal is, God, I'm getting bored. I'm looking for something. I need to trade. So, the way you can do that is you could just review, monitor, predict, review, monitor, predict, review, monitor, predict. And when you review yourself and what you're doing, you'll be able to engage in a deliberate practice versus engaging in whimsical, I'm just trying to get my goal and I'm running out of time.
Review, it's like you're immediately, that's real powerful what you said there. It's like because you're immediately reviewing instead of waiting for the whole trade to be completed, the day to be completed, the week to be completed, to go back and review what you did, which is also important. But you're immediately reviewing how you feel, what you're thinking about, what you're thinking, what you're seeing, trying to compare it to what you saw before you opened and had this opinion. In other words, I'm trying to create an analogy to make people understand that when you get into a trade, it's almost like when we were in third or fourth grade and you raised your hand because and you raised your hand to get called on because but you didn't know the answer. You didn't know if you knew the answer. Usually when you're younger, when we were younger, you raised your hand when you knew the answer and you wanted the whole world to know you knew the answer. That was important to you. And when you're in third or fourth grade, your whole world essentially is that classroom. So, but you knew the answer for the most part when you raised your hand, right? Or you didn't raise it, typically. Nobody would raise their hand if they didn't know the answer. But could you imagine raising your hand and you weren't completely sure of the answer all the time? And you were going to get called on. And you were going to be embarrassed if you were wrong. You probably would never raise your hand. Or if you did, you'd be very nervous and everything else when the teacher called on you to answer that question. And that's what happens in trading. When you put on a trade, you finally, just because you knew where the market was going before you put on the trade, that doesn't count. But now you put a position on in the direction you think price is going. Now all of a sudden you raised your hand, but you don't know the answer. You don't know the answer that for sure it's going up. You're stacking probabilities. So what George is saying is to review how you immediately feel after you open a position and while you're in that position. And if the needle goes off the chart as far as emotion, and then there's things like fear that enters in, a little nervousness is fine as long as you could still, it's like A guy who's a speaker, he's nervous a little bit, but he's not fearful or he wouldn't be able to talk. A guy who's got to give a long speech. Some nerves, but he's not, you wouldn't know it by watching him if he's a professional speaker.
And butterflies are good. I mean, it's good to, it's okay to be in a trade and have butterflies as long as you're looking at the trade and objectively perceiving why you got in the trade, why you're still in the trade, and if it's going in your direction. And I can tell you by experience that there are times I've gotten a trade and then I don't know why I got in the trade. Number one, I totally black out. I totally don't see anything except for one thing on the screen. And my whole focus comes down to basically a dot. And, you freeze.
Yeah. So butterflies are important, but not where the nerves create fear and paralysis.
Yes.
And you got to be diligent in knowing where you're at, because you're just going to then turn that setup into luck. You're going to screw up the trade, even if it's the right trade. So if you're too emotional once you're in a position, you could be dead right, best location, it's going to go up, it is going up, but you're fearful you're going to screw it up. You're going to get out too early. You're going to cut up your winners. You're going to hold on to your losers, because now fear is dictating your decisions, not any kind of objectivity. Butterflies are good, but fear isn't, because it's something you're supposed to do. Could you imagine if every decision you made in operating the airplane, George, came out of fear?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we don't go to work saying we're not going to crash the airplane today. I mean, yeah, that's one of the goals, but it's not in the forefront of our mind, right? And we know there's going to be little mistakes along the way, and we know that there's going to be decisions that we're not going to get totally 100% correct. But the safety factor doesn't go, it doesn't create cost of lives, or it doesn't create bent metal. And that's the way you have to think of trades. You have to kind of take a look at what you are good in your occupation and try to parallel your successes and how you feel in that, and kind of parallel it with trading. I mean, you're gonna have those losing trades. Does it mean that you're a terrible trader? Does it mean that you should lose confidence? If you stuck by your standard operating procedures and why you got in the trade, and you say, hey, it just wasn't my trade, then great. Then that's a whole nother different subject. You may have some things that you need to tweak as far as what you're looking at in creating these set aim fires. But most people don't even get there because they have a problem with the confidence, and they beat themselves up, and they can't do that, because if you keep beating yourself up, guess what? You're going to start believing it. And you just can't do that. It's not healthy.
Consistency is always, anytime the word success is used, consistency is not far behind in what, right, in what would define or explain that success. He was consistent at doing the right thing. Obviously, that's why he's had success. But you've got to be consistent. And if George is alluding to something I've said a lot, be consistently bad. At least then you could say, hey, this is bad, and I got to implement a new strategy. I'm looking at the wrong stuff. But I know for sure it's bad because I've been consistent at executing it. I'm not just trading the losers and missing all the winners. And then you get bogged down and say, well, if I just would trade every trade, and then you get really screwed up, and then that time pressure kicks in and everything. A lot of times on your error side examples here, George, all three of them hit you at once. And you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
Going to get low. Go ahead.
Then you bring the willfulness in there, and you add to a losing trade.
The non-compliant.
Right. You bring in the non-compliance.
Yeah, right. I mean, then everything is working against you. One thing to add to low signal noise ratio is you have to get good at hearing someone without listening to them. I do that with my wife all the time, and not on purpose, but it's probably because I do it so often in trading, where I'm not. It's like what you had said. Sometimes you're listening to the team room, and sometimes you're not, based on what your focus is. You got to be able to not allow anybody to distract you, even if they're talking, because they're not always talking to you anyways. It's like listening to music. You're listening to it on the background, and you can still have a conversation. Sometimes you're dancing to it. Sometimes you're singing it along with it. Other times you're just talking and you kind of notice it in the background. That's how I would want people to treat the team room. Jump in. Sometimes you're collaborating real heavy. Sometimes you just say something. And then when you're listening but not hearing, or hearing but not listening, it's like your mind will know when someone said something important enough for you to absorb.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
And the analogy of that in an airplane, and this is pretty much wrapping up what I wanted to say, is that, under 10,000 feet, we call that sterile cockpit. So during that time, we cut out all oral distractions. So there's not a conversation going on other than, what we're trying to do in the airplane. We're keeping our mind on the SOPs, on what we need to do to create a safe environment. And, you can do that same thing when you're getting ready to trade. You cut out that oral distraction and you bring your mind into focusing, looking and being a part of the market, reading the ups and downs in it. And, and then practicing that perfection within that routine. And then after it's all done, then you debrief it. How did I do? What were my feelings? Did I trade what I saw, and did I read it right? Maybe I read it wrong, but it was, so you just kind of look at those factors. And you can practice this not trading. You can raise your awareness and practice this habit of managing all this white noise just in life, like Ed mentioned before. And so that's pretty much all probably a little bit longer than I wanted to talk, but the confidence, it was tough for me to just do basic. I really have to lend a lot of credit to some of my training in the airline, and this is nothing new that I came up with. This is out there. I mean, this is available to a lot of professions. So
I think it's really interesting to take, if you've been successful at something else, take those routines and those things that you just said, at least recognize them and see how you could duplicate them into trading, because you can't just duplicate everything into it, but you can duplicate some of the skills and some of the strengths that you had and what made you successful. And some of the things you got to get rid of. Some of the things are bad habits. I mean, you could make minor mistakes as a pilot, but you can't make major mistakes, and you avoid making any of those by having some rules like a sterile cockpit under 10,000 feet, because you're close to the damn ground. And it's the same but that doesn't mean there's no noise. There's just, hey, I'm only going to listen to what's pertinent right now. And
correct.
And that's what's important, because you still have to listen. It's even more important to listen to what's pertinent when you're close to the ground in an airplane, or when you're about to open a position, or after you open that position, because something comes across the wire and it's good for your position or bad. You got to know that. Someone says something because an ancillary market jerked around. You want to know that. Build it into your objectivity. If you're objective and you have some confidence, you're not going to let someone else's opinion totally change yours. People who say, well, I don't want to listen to a bunch of opinions because I don't want it to shake mine, they're not confident in their opinion then. I would tell them, no, force yourself to not get persuaded out of an opinion every time someone has one against yours, because you're trading something that constantly has different opinions than yours. That should be by default. When you open a long position, there are people short, totally opposite of you. So
you're both making money, in the team room especially.
Right, you both can make money if your locations and your risk management is good. But don't let other people's opinion change yours. And that only happens when you're not confident or not secure. Yes. It happens in life too. If you have an idea, first person that says it's not a good idea, you'll drop it. Well, that's because you were never confident in the idea anyways. It's a shitty idea. So if you have an opinion that totally, when people tell me this on the phone or they're thinking about joining, they're like, I don't want to listen to other people because I want to change or distract me or whatever else. I'm like, well, then whatever your opinion was probably shitty anyways. And I say it in a nice way, but I try to just tell them like, you're, what I'm telling you works and has worked for me and many people. So for someone when they talk to me to say like they got the answers, no, you might, but you don't have all of them. So what I'm telling you is right. You don't have to believe me, but what I'm telling you is right. The way you got to look and learn and train and review and do exercises on it. And so that's the difference. Is you also aren't stubborn either. Like, well, I'm bullish, and they just shot missiles off into Guam, and I'm still bullish, and that's BS. We'll come back. No, that's not being the confidence. That's not a confidence I'm talking about. It's being able to react and knowing that, hey, I'm following my routine. Nothing's changed. Going back to George, quick review after you open a position. Has anything changed? No. Well, then why would you get out? You know, your area isn't violated. Your stops aren't triggered. You know, everything is working. Yeah, it's a couple ticks against you, but you expected that could happen. You don't have to be happy that happened, but you knew that could happen. It was part of the whole process. Now, over the last 3 weeks, George, you've been trading well enough to get back a down year, which means it's a pretty good 3 week period, right?
Yeah.
So you weren't down a lot, but you were red for the year, and we're in August, and in 3 weeks you get it back. That's really, I mean, most people would be, would give back. It would take them 6 months of profit. They give back in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? They'll give back a green year in 3 weeks. You flipped it around, which is really important. Anything that you've done different in those 3 weeks that you could point to, just
I
fundamentally
would
or
say
mechanically.
technically, mechanically, I would say it's having confidence in my setups.
Whereas before,
I would let them, I would let the market play me out with the price action, and I wasn't confident in what I was setting up. And my setups now, I don't care if I'm wrong, because I know my setups, the probability of my setups are on my side. And so if I'm wrong or I see cues that, we're probably going to go sideways, then it's just hands off the mouse. And, if I lose one trade, then so I lose one trade. But, it's the little battles that you're going to win and lose, but you're the one that's going to make that difference whether you're going to lose or win the war. And, as far as I'm concerned, I could probably go through life, trading. If I never become a millionaire, I don't care, but I won the war because I didn't let it get the best of me, and I continually improved myself. A lot of times you really have to know yourself before you can make money, because guess who the worst enemy is? It's you.
Right.
And until you admit that, and you keep going from one indicator to the next, you have to have confidence in your setups. And you know what? Those setups could change. You look at the guys that traded on the floor. Some of them couldn't make the switch to the screens. So, there's something I have on my screen here, and it's by Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And if you're not willing to change both yourself and the way you look at the market and how you react in the market, guess what? The way I'm trading right now, those setups could go away, and I have to be ready to find something else.
Yeah, and the core, the setup might have to be tweaked, but not go away. Like the skill that you have will allow you to adapt easier, to find a better setup. For instance, maybe it's something simple like volatility. Your setups work better when there's less volatility. And I'm not saying you, just people in general. They work better in low volatile um, scenarios or environments, and they work terribly in a high volatile environment, vice versa. To me, I like markets that move more, but the recognition of when you're going to be at your weakest is how you stay, your strongest. Is really to look in the mirror and have no problem saying you're wrong, have no problem saying, hey, that's fear. I'm not going to let it overtake me. I'm going to just consider it butterflies and still be objective here because
Yeah. And
someone
don't
is
and
dependent.
don't look in the mirror and say I don't care how much money you lost. That doesn't tell you, that doesn't represent who you are as a human being or as a person. And you know what? That was one thing I had to get over. I did make it represent that because I just plain old didn't want to fail. But that's a huge way of destroying your confidence also, is you just keep hitting yourself over the head.
You have to be good at being wrong without tearing yourself down. You can't take it personal.
No,
You
it's
can't take it
business.
personal.
It's totally business. And guess what? You know what? The odds are against you. The odds are against you. But if you find the right way to control yourself, you can put the odds on your side, even though you may have losing trades.
So your process, could you teach your wife your setup and say, just trade this for me today?
I believe I could, but I don't know if she'd be successful with it because the emotions of the money she'd probably watch the money versus watching what
Right.
the market's doing.
And that's a great way to, that's a great answer. So it's easy enough to understand, but not necessarily implement unless you also
It's
understand the emotions of it.
it's yeah, it's very simple, and I think I've told you that. I know I've told guys in the rooms, I love to fish, and I especially love to fish for walleye. And there are days that I can't catch a frickin' walleye, but I just change something. Maybe it's a different size spinner or a different color lure, or maybe it's just the way I drop it in the water. Everything that you need to be successful is on the screen in front of you. It's up to you to find out and read it and let it tell you the story of what's going on.
You got to listen. You got to know what to
You
watch
do.
for and how to listen to it. That's how I want people to use me when it's in the room. It's just, is everything I say important? No, but know when something is important to you and know how to use it. Let the market talk to you. It's the market talking to you. That's kind of how I'm trying to run the room. Just trying to repeat what the market's telling me. In my opinion, it's the market's opinion. And it's a way to detach that personal affliction we have with saying, I was wrong, you suck. That's going to tear you down. That's going to beat you up. You got to be good at being wrong at the same time being confident to continue to swing that bat. Because what George just said, it's business. This is not personal. The way you have your spouse and your kids, that's personal. That defines you as a person, how you are with other people. If most people who know you say you're a jerk off, well, then you are. But not because you had some losing trades or because you became a victim of being non-compliant or time pressure. But the recognition of all this stuff is the step one of eliminating it. Like I said at the workshop, the how do you become the best of yourself, the best version of yourself? We all have our best versions and our low versions, when we're really crappy people or when we're really great. And how do you stay at being the best version of yourself, the best version of your trading self? And one way is to recognize when you're not. If you can't recognize when you're shitty, then you're gonna stay shitty. So you got to recognize it and bounce out. The other thing is the community. What I had said in the workshop was, you want to be around people who tell you that you suck, not because they hate you, but because they want you to get better. And there's a difference. There are a lot of people out there that tell you you suck because they don't like you. They actually take pride in you sucking. But if you put yourself around people who are willing to tell you suck in a nice enough way where you know it's because they want you to get better, that's the only chance you have of getting better and then staying better. Because this is no magic potion. You got to get confident. You got to stay confident. Now, there was no breaking point though from the last three. Was there any minor changes you made over the last few weeks, or you just felt much more confident and you didn't let the emotions make decisions after you got into your setups?
Yeah, that was probably the biggest thing, is the really doing the personal inventory once I got into my setups, because I kept doing a debrief or looking at all my setups and going, why are you losing money or breaking even here? And because the setup is there, I could see it. I could see it before the fact and I could see it after the fact. And I knew exactly where I was right and I knew exactly where I was wrong. But I would let the emotion of how the market was reacting change my stop or my profit. And, when I stopped, how do I want to say this? It's not necessarily, you can absolutely change your mind once you're in a trade, but you better be darn sure that you're looking at the big picture.
Because it's not fear changing. Better not be fear changing your mind.
Absolutely, because our egos all say we always want to be right? Hey, look what I said. The market went up today. Well, really, who gives a shit? It's did I could have made 3 or 4 trades on both sides of the market. As long as I'm seeing the whole picture and I know exactly where I need to get out and I know why I'm getting out, and I can conceptually think about it as the trade is open, okay, I'm good. If I look at it and I say, oh shit, I got, my son's going to college tomorrow, I got to take him down there, I'm getting worried about, is he going to be safe down there? I got to talk to him about, some of the drinking stuff and the drugs and whatever else. And that's kind of far out there, but it's any little distractions, any little noise that you're not focused in why you're in this trade or not in this trade, or how you're reacting to it while in the trade. To me, that's really, for me, that was the turning point. It's
you'd go back and looked at your first 6 months and say, I had great trades. I just botched them up after I was in them.
I did. Absolutely. I was my own worst enemy.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, that if you don't, and then you would be more inclined, if you didn't do that review, to blame the setup.
Exactly. I can't tell you. There's probably setups out there that I've done that work just fine, but because of my whimsical attitude, they didn't work, right?
You botched them up. You didn't let them play out. So in turn, you weren't even trading the setup.
No, I was trading my feelings. I was trading what I thought the market was going to do. And these setups, when you find setups that start working for you and they're at places where you honestly believe that you're probably going to be wrong, they're probably good setup.
Yeah, there you go. I often say that. When you're least confident, they're the best trades. When you're most confident, those are the worst trades. Because others don't want to buy it there either, or get long there.
And if you find yourself buying at the top and selling at the bottom, guess what? Number one, you probably don't have a system. And number two, you're letting time pressure affect you. And I've been there. I've done that.
Let the market come down, and even if it's bearish, the fade, like if you're looking at my screens right now, you could see how this market aggressively came into this zone, and it wiped it out. Comes right back, and it holds, and it holds. But unless you create some sort of idea around this, recognition, and a step-by-step pattern, it's going to be hard to execute. At least this allows you, these edge zones will start to allow you to see what the house is looking like a lot better. before it's finished. Because once the house is finished, it's too late. Can't make any money on the prediction of what it's going to look like. It's all about framework to allow you to have your best step one, to have a better step one in your setup. And what George is going over are all the steps that follow after you execute that trade. Emotionally, internally. Review immediately. There's something that I have that I hope for it to be out before the end of the year that'll do that for you guys. But just sit patient and do it. Just what you really got to do is ask yourself a question after you get in the trade. What's the best way to review immediately while you're in the trade, George? What do you do? Do you ask yourself a question?
First thing I do is it's a deep breath, and I see how sweaty my palms are.
Really?
And I try to control my breathing. Then the next step is at the same time I'm looking at my levels. So I mean right now, 62.5 probably is a good long, right? I'm wrong below that, and if I want to be short, I'm probably looking at this saying, it's probably not going to happen unless we get down and we can start offering 62s, right? So that's a 3-tick, 4-tick difference, that's pretty easy. And look at, I'm already out of my first one right here. And, I'm kind of giving away some of my stuff here, but without saying anything, but that's really that I'm looking at the screens. That's a trade right there that I would have been in.
What if your palms are sweaty? What do you do?
Then, I've found that if my palms are sweaty, it's probably a good trade. If they're not sweaty and I'm overconfident, then
so you want to find that middle.
Yeah, you gotta, and everyone reacts differently to it, Like right now, we're coming back into it again, and I'm definitely moving my stop up to 1 tick below or break even, and now I'm just gonna let it ride. Now I've done my plan. This is my plan. I'm gonna stick with it unless I see something now down the road that, maybe we get something in the filter or something in the balance up here at 64s that says they're just retesting this breakdown and we're going to come back down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always reviewing in my mind what price could do both ways. And we're starting to do this more and more in the room. I know Dave is, I know Peter is we can see where retail is coming in and where they're going to get spanked. We can see it. We watch it. We've been vocal about it. And it's, when you can get to that point, like right now, retail they're going to want to break, buy this breakout. Chances are maybe they're going to test that down move and we're going to, those 64s and we're going to come back down and their eyes are going to be wide open. But, it's lunch hour too, right? So we could just go sideways also.
No, this was good stuff. There's a lot of things that go into trading, and most of them are after you get into the damn trade. You got to have good fundamentals, good foundation, order flow to be able to create good setups. But man, you're not trading yourself; the market will.
It's people. I really don't think that people have a problem pushing the button. I think intuitively and subconsciously, they don't know how to feel and react after they've pushed the button.
I agree. They don't. And they don't even take the steps to try to figure that out.
No. Because they figure after they push the button, now it should work.
Right.
Well, no. Now is when you really have to be its sterile cockpit and you really have to focus on what's going on.
I remember saying that a long time ago about people think that their decision-making process is over with after they get into a trade, but little do they know it just began. After you get in the trade.
Then there's that fine line of, talking yourself out of the trade versus letting the market tell you what's happening. And the only way you're gonna get that is by watching order flow. That's the only way. You're not going to get that by watching candlesticks. The only way you're going to get that is by watching volumes at price and order flow.
Then you know the market's telling you to change your mind, not your fear.
Yep.
Not whether or not it's 2 ticks against you or 2 ticks your way. It's the market telling you, just like a plane telling you or an instrument telling you, hey, make a decision, make a different decision. That isn't working. Great. And you got to build that. We let our fears make the decisions for us and not even realize it. And we don't even practice to move out of that. But George, thanks a lot. This has been helpful. Some guys are thanking you as well.
My pleasure.
I'll have this up on the website. I did not add yesterday or last week. Trevor did last week. I will post them both up in Track 4. Usually I do it the same day, but last week was a tough week. This week we'll have them both up, and you guys will have it. But thanks again, George. We'll see you in the trading room and team room.